Mark Freeman and his staff are preparing to host the biggest recruiting weekend of the season when the Irish take on Florida State. Why this is such an important event and which prospects are on commit watch, coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, and welcome into another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. And today is Thursday, November 7th, and thanks for joining me here and making this your first listen of the day. As always, you can watch every episode on YouTube, or you can listen wherever it is that you get your podcast. For those of you watching along, remember, like this video below and subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Quick programming note, though, before we get started here. Tomorrow is Friday, which means we are doing another Friday mailbag. So get your questions in if you want to be featured on tomorrow's show. As always, you can submit them below in the YouTube comments or send them to me on social media. The X account is at Locked On Irish and the Instagram is at Locked On Irish Pod. But as for today, we got recruiting analyst Eric Thomas from Irish Illustrated back on the show to preview a massive recruiting weekend for the Irish. They are set to host a bunch of committed prospects who are committed to Notre Dame, a bunch of prospects who are committed elsewhere that Notre Dame is trying to flip, and a couple of top prospects on defense that Notre Dame has been going after for such a long time. And really, this weekend is their last big swing in the class of 2025 before the early signing day next month. Me and Eric cover a lot. I had a great time doing this, and I hope you enjoyed as well. Here he is. All right, I'm joined once again by recruiting analyst Eric Thomas from Irish Illustrated. And Eric, even though the matchup on the field between Notre Dame and Florida State doesn't quite have the same stakes that we thought it would before the season, it's still a massively important recruiting weekend for Mark Freeman and the Irish. So to start, just set the stage for us.
Yeah, it is. We've been talking about this for a few weeks on Irish Illustrated. The staff had definitely built some optimism throughout the season that this was going to be a big week for them. We started to get those names trickling in over the past few weeks. So in terms of just like the commitment, starting there, Justin Thurman, Dom Pulak, Elijah Burris, Antavius Richardson, Brandon Logan, Jadon Blair, Cree Thomas are all going to be there. And there's still room for maybe one or two more there. Some of the guys have games scheduled, playoff games and stuff, but we have a solid core of commits. Beyond that, there are 4 official visitors. That's Jaylen Wiggins, a Florida defensive line commit, tight end Andrew Oash, a Michigan tight end commit, Anon Parham, who's a Tulane wide receiver commit, and Nolan James Jr., who's a running back who's committed to Boston College. Beyond that, there's a number of unofficial visitors. We've actually are working to confirm a couple more right now. We've been working on that throughout the course of the day. Sounds like it's not exactly booked yet, but the ones that have fully confirmed, they're going to be there. 2025 senior linebacker Madden Foro and Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. And then the 2026 class, we have Connor Salmon, who's a wide receiver, a pair of linebackers, Thomas Davis Jr., familiar name for NFL fans, and Tank King, awesome name. And then we'll have a cornerback, Chasten Smith, and a defensive end, Mikhail Blade, confirmed as well.
That is a long list of, first of all, committed prospects and people who are not committed. And it doesn't feel like your typical recruiting weekend. On one hand, yes, Notre Dame is going to be playing in a primetime game, and I feel like that always helps. It gives you a little bit more time with the recruits during the day. But other than that fact, because the opponent, they haven't been great this season. Yeah. I think that's fair to say. What else does the staff have in store for this group of visitors?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be connecting them with alumni, NFL alumni, making sure that they're able to answer questions. The idea of having those sort of panels available to a large group of prospects like this, as well as the commits, when we would run that stuff, basically you would get everyone in an area and you're usually effectively setting the table for them. Like you try to have your targets mixed in with commits and their parents, so that naturally as you go through these conversations with these alumni, you're having the conversations that are mixed, right? Like the parents are talking with one another and kind of considering things. The kids are talking with one another. And it creates this almost natural connection to the information. So they'll probably be doing quite a bit of sort of intermingling and targeted intermingling, just like that. And then in addition, look, it's a night game. They've talked about an Irish Illustrated recently. Notre Dame's environment maybe isn't the best in the country on its best day, let alone for a team like Florida State this year. But this is still going to be like one of the better home environments of the year. It's going to be loud. People are still going to want to beat the absolute pants off the Seminoles. Like, it's going to be an environment where people are hungry to get this win with playoff stakes. And with that, there's a certain energy in the crowd when you have this big of a group and you have like these level of commits that are all recruiters for this class. It's going to create a really sort of self-serving and sort of funnel environment where guys feel like they're really being recruited throughout the experience, even if it's almost subliminal. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm so bummed I won't be able to make it there this weekend, but I want to focus on the 5 prospects who are committed elsewhere that Notre Dame is going to try to flip this weekend, because this does feel like Notre Dame's last big swing for the class of 2025. So they've got several guys on campus, but I want to start with the defensive lineman, Jaylen Wiggins, who's currently committed to Florida. And to me, he might be the biggest boost if he were to commit to Notre Dame, because the Irish desperately need help on the defensive line, and I think Wiggins is a really good player on that unit. How do you think he would project to the Notre Dame defense? Do you think they put him outside on the edge, or maybe try him out at the interior? Because let's be honest, Notre Dame has missed on the interior of the defensive line in the past few classes.
Yeah. Honestly, if we hadn't seen so much from Logan Thomas throughout the course of this year, even in moments, I think the projection of the edge would be almost out of necessity. But given the fact that there are multiple options at each defensive end position, with the return of Botello, the return of Boubacar Traore from injury, Bryce Young being an ascending player, and Logan Thomas being an ascending player, you have a 2 deep at either end there. And you already have Joshua Burnham and Junior Tuli Halamaka, who are ascending guys. So for Wiggins, if you put him in the defensive end side, it might be where his ceiling is highest and you can get like a really good player there. But if you're looking just from a pure, like where the roster is right now, he does have the size and some of the skill set to be able to translate inside of the 3 tech. The biggest question you have there is, what is the timeline that it would take for him to be able to not only move inside and like sustain himself just health-wise at his current weight and size, but once he gains that size and that mass, which it looks like he has the frame to do, does he experience any loss of some of his athletic intangibles? Because right now, Wiggins is probably not the most developed, like borderline top 100 edge rusher or defensive lineman you'll see. He's a really good player, but he wins a lot on like his physical tools and like building the plane while he's rushing, as opposed to like having a plan, hitting his tracks. Like, there's a lot of development there that you want to kind of stick him in a position and let him grow, because he has every tool to be successful once he's there. I think, like I said, his ceiling's probably higher at edge, but if you're looking at like where he could produce the most value next season, if he enrolls early and can add the weight and look like a participant early, he would have the best chance inside for sure. And he has the frame for it.
The consensus does seem to be that he is a bit of a developmental prospect, and that doesn't mean he can't make an impact early on, because I think even Logan Thomas was considered a developmental prospect, because he had to certainly fill out once he got on campus. And unfortunately, I think he's going to miss this game due to an injury, but he's been terrific this season when he's been out there. So with Wiggins, it's like they've been on him for a while. This is a big last swing to try to get his services, but he's not the only guy. I want to talk about tight end Andrew Oash, because this one is a little bit interesting to me. It caught me by surprise, because Notre Dame has had a tight end committed in this class for a really long time. James Flanagan, Notre Dame legacy, just outside the top 100 on 24/7 Sports. And now you have a Michigan commit coming in there. And that's not to say he's going to replace Flanagan, because you can absolutely take 2 tight ends in a class. But how did this come together? How did Oash come to the fold?
Yeah, he committed to Michigan in July. And I think for as comfortable as Notre Dame was for much of this cycle, taking 1 tight end, we do have to kind of go back, like when James Flanagan's recruitment was heating up with Notre Dame, really up until about, a month before he committed, or maybe even less than that, Nate Roberts was committed to Ohio State. And Notre Dame was very comfortable taking both of those players. Nate Roberts wasn't comfortable with that, but Notre Dame was.
I would have been very comfortable taking Nate Roberts as well. That dude's a stud.
Yes, he is. And when you kind of look at how the class has developed since then, I think there was a sense from Notre Dame that they weren't sure kind of where their best opportunity was at tight end, and they weren't sure if they needed it. And with how good the wide receiver prospects looked in the summer, I think there might have been some back burner of that, because they really liked Flanagan. Now, since Oash is committed to July, Notre Dame has been working on him. They've been making phone calls and kind of just trying to get in the picture. That really has reared its head publicly, probably over the last 2 months or so. That started mostly with Oash mentioning them publicly. It wasn't even something that we were hearing so much from Notre Dame in the background, which was purposeful. You're trying to flip someone, you try to keep it quiet, but you can't really help if a mic gets in the kid's face and he says something. So it started to hit the public a little bit. It's been interesting because he mentioned specifically, and I want to say this was about a month ago, he mentioned that it was important to him that Michigan was recruiting him as the only tight end in the class. That was the quote. And it stood out to me because they have another tight end committed in the class. It's just a very strange thing. The other competitors are also interesting. Alabama was very deeply involved in this one, and then they flipped, whose name I'm now forgetting, Notre Dame Legacy out of North Carolina. They flipped a 4-star tight end there. Oregon is heavily involved here. They're expecting to get him back. He just did an unofficial there 2 weeks ago. They're expecting that he has an option to get back on November 30th. However, most of the consensus, I'm not an Oregon expert, but from what I've been reading, is that they're only going to take one tight end, and they are very likely to flip a kid from Washington. His name is Vander Plug, so I'm pretty sure he's going to be good because that rocks. If they go for 2 tight ends, as good as Oash is, they're also in a really good position for Lincoln Cure, the number 1 tight end in the country, is Kansas State commit. So I don't know how likely it actually is that he ends up at Oregon, despite the interest being real. And he has great relationships with Penn State and Michigan. So there's a lot of different factors with him. Notre Dame's going to have one chance to stick this landing, unlike some of these schools. So it's definitely going to be an uphill battle for them to win this one. But with the history and legacy of tight ends, it supersedes even what we've seen recently from Penn State and Michigan. There's enough of an argument there that I think Notre Dame is going to want to get clarity on this quickly to know what their chances are so they can move on Tiandre Waverly. But they will be pushing aggressively to enter the top of the fold really this weekend so they can have an assessment moving forward.
And for the record, Oash is the 3rd-ranked tight end in the class. He's actually rated a little bit higher than James Flanagan, but I mean, they're both really talented prospects. And the player you're referring to who committed to Alabama, that is Marshall Pritchett. His dad was the leading tackler on the last Notre Dame team to win the national championship. And I think a lot of fans are like, wait, why isn't Notre Dame recruiting this guy? Well, I think he was a bit of a late bloomer, if I have that correctly. So, look, it happens. Either way, Notre Dame already has one legacy tight end in this class. And if they're able to land Oash, that'd be another great haul for them. Wide receiver, Anon Parham, committed to Tulane. Let's be honest, Notre Dame is pretty desperate at receiver. Yeah. It's something that you and I have talked about quite a bit, dating back to this summer. He's got great size. He's listed as 6'3.5", 195 pounds, but he is the 149th ranked receiver in the class on the 24/7 Sports composite. What's holding him back?
From my side, a lack of explosiveness. He can do a lot of good things. He separates naturally with his length. He's really long, got really long legs. He can catch aggressively at the catch point, like he can go up and over guys. He can come down with it with one hand. He's shown that. He can do a lot of dynamic, exciting things. He's not the most dynamic, exciting athlete when it comes to getting out of his breaks and creating separation with speed. He doesn't have great acceleration, although once he gets going, it's like, oh my God, his strides are so long, he's flying. Yeah. But he's a player who I think would if you're optimistic about what things look like for him, he's probably a player who looks like Jaden Thomas, maybe. If you're more realistic about what he looks like, even given the needs at Notre Dame, more realistically, he's probably more of a Deion Colsey level production type player. And I don't want to throw stones at this kid. He's definitely a prospect with some talent and some room to grow. But the more you look at him, it feels like he is as close to a 1-to-1 replacement answer that the Irish can have for a guy like Derrik Meadows since they moved off of Jace Brown. They're looking for a boundary receiver with size, with some level of speed, some projectability, I guess you would say, as a deep threat, because I don't know that his tape shows that he would be able to do that at the next level, even if he can do it now. And he checks those boxes. I don't know that he's the most exciting prospect. You can probably see that in my face as I answer this, but he's a guy who I think probably has more upside than an 87 grade on 247, but not much.
Eric is going to be right back here with us in a second to break down the latest on Derrik Meadows' visit and Notre Dame's chances of flipping him. But first, a word from Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Today's episode is presented by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. All right, here's my pick this week. It's Thursday, which means Thursday Night Football, and I am taking the underdog once again. The Bengals take on the Ravens. It is in Baltimore, but you know what? I like Cincinnati plus 6.5. I don't know if they're going to win, but they are desperate. They need to win a bunch more games to make the playoff, and I think they are going to cover that 6.5 point spread on the road, and that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. You brought him up, Derrik Meadows. He's one of the headliners coming in this weekend. He is someone that you and I have talked about before. I've talked about him extensively on this show. He was the top priority for Notre Dame at the wide receiver position in this class. He plays for Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas, one of the best high school programs in the entire country. That's where Ronnie Stanley went to school. And ultimately, Notre Dame came up short when Meadows picked LSU. Now, he is still committed to LSU, but he is going to be on campus this weekend. When you look at his recruitment, it's one of the more dramatic, I think it's fair to say, recruitments that Notre Dame has been involved in this cycle, because he picked LSU and there was like a moment in time where he pushed his commitment date back a week and it felt like Notre Dame was making the strong push late. Now he's at LSU, but he's going to visit Notre Dame this weekend, fresh off a visit last weekend when he went to Michigan. So I know it's like probably impossible for you to say at this point in time, but what is going on with Derrik Meadows and his recruitment right now?
Yeah, so there's different angles you can do. I did a report on kind of what's been going on with some of these guys, and with Meadows, it was all over the place. So in the background, obviously there's a pursuit by Michigan for local #1 prospect Bryce Underwood, 5-star quarterback committed to LSU. That has caused some ripple effects in the LSU class, where guys like Meadows have expressed at least an openness to looking at other schools again and kind of maybe move the needle more towards that if it was open before. LSU sources are confident. Sonny Ship, I believe, over at 247, just last week wrote an article where he said he was still 75% sure that Underwood was going to stay at LSU. And if he signed with the Tigers, he was confident that Meadows would do the same. What I've been picking up from sources on our side, the conversation with Meadows and Notre Dame never stopped. Basically, from the moment he committed to LSU, they were like, great, now the Tigers have the target on their back. We're going to keep calling you. And they did. To their credit, they just kept doing it. It's a testament to Notre Dame that he's there. He wouldn't be taking this visit, I don't believe, if Notre Dame didn't genuinely have a chance. The reporting and the overall sentiment about this visit is that there is a mutual interest, some degree. Level is hard, but there's some degree of mutual interest here. What we're hearing about Michigan is that unless they land Bryce Underwood, it seems unlikely that Meadows will end up there. It seems like he was probably on campus because NIL got them back in the conversation. That's not me shaming them. It's just the reality right now. Michigan's opening the wallet. So it's a little bit different on that side. If Underwood ends up leaving LSU, I do think it's most likely that Meadows ends up at Notre Dame. Michigan's probably right there. My hesitation, I wrote this last week, Meadows had everything thrown at him from Notre Dame. Just everything. They threw every pitch, everything to turn his head they could to be competitive, and he chose LSU. And if Bryce Underwood leaves, I can understand the calculus changing, right? There's no longer the number one prospect. There's enough motivation to change. But if Bryce Underwood stays at LSU, I don't see a reality where he goes to Notre Dame. What has fundamentally changed? Like, he didn't have his head turned by offers from Michigan, who had the best NIL offer when he was down to his final five. He told them thanks, but no thanks, and continued to hear bid up offers from LSU, Alabama, and Notre Dame, and eventually just LSU and Notre Dame. So money doesn't seem to be the number one driving factor for Meadows. Is it playing with Bryce Underwood? Well, then Michigan plus money might be the better option than Notre Dame, which would put them second again. So there's just enough weirdness about what is the actual priority that has changed here for him to reopen his consideration that I don't have an answer to, that makes it difficult for me to project. I think right now, if you had to list them, most likely outcome from everything I've gathered, he sticks with LSU, he goes to Notre Dame, he goes to Michigan, and that.
A lot of great stuff there. Number one, not only did Notre Dame throw everything at him, they also had a commitment from Deuce Knight at the time, who was also one of the most vocal recruiters on the side of Notre Dame. He is now officially and publicly committed to Auburn. And just as an aside, it is insane to me that we live in a world where LSU, who's like the NIL capital of college athletics, not just in football, but in literally every sport, that they could potentially get outbid by Michigan. Yeah. But it's amazing what happens after a 5-4 season, even though they're fresh off winning a national championship, how quickly those checkbooks open up to ensure that something like that never happens again. But with Meadows, I'm kind of at the point where, like, look, I get it. Notre Dame needs receivers in this class in a bad way. They do not have a player of Meadows' size who can also run like he can. But I look at his stats for his senior season, and again, he plays at a big-time high school football program. He has 19 receptions, 445 receiving yards, which is pretty insane off of just 19 receptions, and 5 touchdowns. The 19 reception scares me. What do you make of his production this year, or lack thereof?
It's interesting. When we saw it his junior season, and I came on the beat between, in the offseason here between, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, well, they had a large influx of transfers who had all played together for a number of years, who came in his junior year for their senior year. And so all those guys had familiarity. It was multiple receivers. It was the quarterback, and it was one of the running backs. So there was sort of like a built-in excuse for him of like, okay, well, chemistry's not going to be there the same. And like, it's a big time offense. If they feel that there's chemistry plus talent there, he's going to be the odd man out. He's still getting like offset looks that are really productive. And so there was a little bit of like bending over backwards to be like, okay, yeah, this is what happens. But realistically, once some of those factors alleviate themselves, you need to see a transition. And what we've seen from Meadows this season is I think last year he was the number 3 receiver on the team. This year he's number 2. His numbers are not drastically different in terms of receptions, touchdowns, or yards. I think he's a little bit higher than the rest in yards, but overall not drastically different than the number 3 or 4 receivers. And there's just a lack of differentiation in his production that you would expect from his tools, given the talent around him and what he's capable of. And it is concerning. It is troubling. And I can share, the same the same Irish Invasion event that Meadows participated in 2 years ago. And Notre Dame was like, oh my God, that's our number one guy. He's crazy. At least 1 or 2 media members walked away from that. Like, I don't think he can catch. Like, I really don't think he can catch.
It's important.
Yeah. And it's not showing itself that way as much in his high school tape, which you can take also as a good or bad, because it's like, oh, he's not dropping any balls because he's not getting the targets. Oh, and I don't know how to square that exactly. So like, maybe he's fixed the drop issue a little bit. Maybe he's not getting the volume to show it, but he's not getting targets. And a lack of targets, like if you're his pedigree of recruit and you have his level of production, the expectation is you would look over in that target column and it would be like 9 of them. And you'd be like, I don't know why he's only catching 2 balls out of 9 targets. Maybe the quarterback's bad. But that's not happening. And they are a good passing team. So I think the big takeaway is that Meadows has 5-star tools. There's no denying. His athletic measurables are 5-star caliber, he's probably a 3-star wide receiver prospect. And like, you just have to be able to bridge those and find something in between the two, because I don't know what to make of that. And quite frankly, even if they pull off this miracle flip, we talked about this before we started actually like going in, I would probably bet money that Elijah Burris ends up producing at Notre Dame before Derrik Meadows does. Like, I don't know that his path is quick there. It might be better at the back end. It might be awesome Chase Claypoolish at the back end, but it might take 4 years to get there. I don't know how to square that.
Yeah, and if you're the Notre Dame coaching staff, like, I get it. You see Meadows, you see how he's physically built and his speed, and it's like, man, I can fix him, right? Mm-hmm. But you look at the production, you think about everything that Notre Dame has invested into this recruitment. It doesn't really compute in my mind. Now, maybe Derrik Meadows gets on campus if he's willing to stick around for a little bit, because that's another thing too. It's like, he definitely does not look like the type of player who's going to step on campus in college and be physically ready to go from day one. And for a player of this pedigree, usually if they're not getting on the field this early, especially at a position like wide receiver, they're probably going to start to look elsewhere. But look, that is way down the line, and I think this is just another chapter in the Derrik Meadows story. Personally, I don't think he's going to end up at Notre Dame, but maybe, things change after this weekend. The one thing that we can count on with this recruitment is that it's unpredictable, and we don't really know what is going to happen. But I also want to talk about two other uncommitted prospects, or at least these guys aren't committed to anywhere. The guys we've talked about, they are committed to certain schools, but not these two guys. Notre Dame is going to be hosting their top two linebackers on the board. These are two guys that they've been after for a long time. Fans are very familiar with them. Linebacker Madden Foro out of California, and Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, brother of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, out of IMG Academy. And there was a point this summer when it felt like Notre Dame could land both of them. I still think they're in good position to land Foro, but where do the Irish stand with these prospects as we sit here today?
Yeah, it's been a while. I put my crystal ball in for Notre Dame to land Foro like 12 hours after his visit or something.
His most recent one?
His official visit back in June.
Yeah, I remember that was when we thought they would both end up at Notre Dame.
Yeah, we really thought that. There might have been some things written. We definitely thought that. Notre Dame's in a good spot for Madden Foro. The Final Four he's down to is Texas, USC, Washington, and Notre Dame. And he is going to take in Notre Dame 2 more times. He's going to be on campus this weekend for Florida State, and then he's going to be in the Coliseum when Notre Dame and USC play. Obviously, he's not their guest, but hey, we'll take any free marketing. It's uncertain. It doesn't look like, I have not seen any reporting indicating he'll be back in Washington. There remains a possibility, and I have to get the date. I think Notre Dame USC is November 30th, so I believe the date for him projected for Texas is November 23rd. He has not finalized that visit. Texas sources have been talking about it for about a month. It is not booked. It is not final. We're not sure if he's going to go. It seems like, reading the tea leaves here, Notre Dame and USC are trending enough away that really in a top 4, it's a final 2 and 2 dark horses that are falling out of it. As much as USC has trended and put good sort of work in on this recruitment to put themselves in the competition, and to their credit, sort of maximized him meaningfully keeping the window open seemingly for them, I don't expect them to be able to supersede Notre Dame in this race. I think there's enough familiarity with Notre Dame. I think there's enough clarity about like his path forward at Notre Dame, but also where that path can lead. Like, there is tangible, direct proof that with this staff, with all recent Notre Dame staffs, they'll find a way to put linebackers in the NFL if you're good enough. And ultimately, he feels that he's in that path. He feels that his good friend Kingston Biliamawasa is on that path. And I think they feel that they can walk that path together. And I ultimately think that'll be enough to beat out USC. Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng is a little different. The man loves the recruiting process. He loves the visits. He loves the feedback and the interviews and all that. And this isn't even like they're on shade. Look, I would have been the same way. I would have been insufferable to recruit, so I get it. At the same token, it makes it very hard to just like get a pulse on him. And what I've been working on the past week is really just trying to iron out, like, despite the fact that there's a lot of changes and variability here, and even just like perspective changes from him that we've documented in his interviews, what seems to be sticking? And what seems to be sticking in this recruiting process is Notre Dame and Michigan. USC seems to have fallen a little bit. Colorado has a lot of energy, but I don't actually know how viable that is to produce a commitment and eventually a signing. Florida is Florida, and I don't want to go too much into that, but yeah, they're not looking great. Texas is interesting because there was a moment this year. Alabama had a moment where they were probably the best recruiting team in the country, and Texas took that title from probably at the end of the summer, beginning of the season. Texas has slowed down, and for as good as they've been, it looks like Texas is going to have a rough class at linebacker. Riley Pettijohn does not look like he's going to flip from Ohio State. Madden Foro does not look like he's going to go to Texas. And Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, barring a blow it out of the water visit in November, probably is also not going to go to Texas. So it's coming down to Notre Dame and Michigan. Our sources have been split on where the Irish stand right now about landing both. One source seemed pretty confident that they would not land both. That at this stage it was likely one. I personally find myself thinking that that's likely the case, not so much because they're worried about each other, but just logically, I think that Michigan has probably done enough with Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng that if Madden Foro goes to Notre Dame, he might just feel like, well, my best opportunity is at Michigan, and that's just the way it goes.
But just to clarify, Notre Dame would be willing to take both. This is not a first to commit situation. Okay, just want to make sure.
If both wanted to come to Notre Dame, they would be able to come to Notre Dame. I just don't know that that's going to come to pass. But I think it's more likely that it's Madden Foro than Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, if they somehow miss on Foro. It looks like Owusu-Boateng is probably announcing in December. He keeps tweeting out, I think, December 3rd or 4th as of date, just no caption or whatever. I think that they will move mountains to make sure between Foro's likely commitment in November, probably, he said at end of the season. There's been rumors about it coming to an end for weeks. I think it'll probably be November. I think they'll move mountains in those week or two to make sure Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng ends up at Notre Dame if Madden doesn't. Yeah,
you and I talked about this before. Once Owusu-Boateng took his visit to Michigan last weekend, he said all the right things. I mean, it's just so classic. This was the best weekend ever, this best visit ever. And then there were some fans on the Irish Illustrated message boards who were like, oh man, this probably means he's not going to visit Notre Dame. And I was just sitting there reading that thinking, this man is going to visit Notre Dame, and he's going to visit Texas. I don't know if he's going to go there. Yep, he will 100% take those visits. That's one thing that you can count on. But the last question I've got for you before I let you go, of the guys who are visiting this weekend, the guys in the class of 2025. So you've got the 5 guys who are committed elsewhere, plus Madden Foro and Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, who are in the class of 2025, have not committed to any school. Which players do you think will ultimately choose Notre Dame on signing day?
Yeah, Nolan James Jr. I think is going to go to Notre Dame. I feel very confident about that. Haven't put a crystal ball in or anything. I think I've talked about this. I feel like crystal balls are sometimes blowing up kids' spots, so I try to avoid them. But
we haven't even talked about Nolan James Jr. today. Just to clarify, he's the running back on the same team as Elijah Burris, and after Daniel Anderson and Notre Dame parted ways, this is who Notre Dame went after for their second running back. All right. Sorry, just wanted to clarify because we haven't talked about him at all.
Yeah, and he's awesome. He's a guy, the first time I watched Burris this fall, I texted Kevin Sinclair. I was like, oh my God, this Nolan James kid is awesome. And we just kept seeing him, and it was like, oh my God, he's so good. It's going to be a pain in the butt to play him at Boston College. And then when Daniel Anderson decommitted, I believe I wrote that, I don't have any evidence for this right now, but if I was Notre Dame, I would go after this kid. And here we are. So
they were clearly reading.
Yeah, let's hope so. Knock on wood. I like Nolan James' game a lot. He compares to Aeneas Williams and Kyron Williams. I'm always hesitant for player comps because I don't think he's Aeneas Williams or Kyron Williams right away, but he's that same sort of mold of player, just really versatile, very willing to pass block, pretty good at it at this point. There's a lot of value there at the base level with growth potential. If Meadows ends up at LSU, as I project, or I guess Michigan as well, I think Parham will end up at Notre Dame. I don't see a situation where Meadows is an option for Notre Dame and Parham can commit. So that should be sorted out, I think, soon, but that's where we're at. Wiggins is a hard one to get a read on. I think it's probably more likely than not right now that Notre Dame lands him, just because he had so much reticence to reopen his recruitment after his official visits. The fact that he's doing so is an indication of intent, in my opinion. But that being said, we need to see how the visit goes, because this could very well be a situation where he gets on campus, talks to the coaches, yeah, it's a great time, but I just really enjoy Florida more. And that's the vision he has, and he wants to stay with it. Very possible. So I would lean more likely than not now, but that's pre-visit and very subject to change. Oash, I think it's probably less than likely that he ends up at Notre Dame, just because not only it's probably like a 50% chance he flips, and then from there, there's other targets. If he does flip, I think Notre Dame and Penn State are probably the two best chances. Oregon seems like the most competitive outside looking in, but like I said, there's other circumstances outside of his control. I think Madden Foro is going to end up at Notre Dame, and depending on what happens with Foro, if he does end up as expected, I'd say you're probably looking at like 35-40% chance they also land at Wusu Boateng. It's not zero. It's certainly better than some of these other schools have of landing him, period. But I find it harder and harder as we get closer to signing day and as he looks at his opportunities elsewhere to think that he's going to end up in the same class with Madden Foro, given the logjam of talent at Notre Dame. I just think it'll be tough to get both of them to sign up for that.
Eric, this has been great, and you can read all of his work on IrishIllustrated.com. Plus, you can listen to his podcast with friend of the program, Kevin Sinclair, Tracking the Trail. Thanks so much for taking the time during a really busy week. I know it's going to be a very chaotic weekend for you, so best of luck, and we'll talk again soon around the early signing day.
Perfect. I appreciate it, Tyler. Always a pleasure.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Hims. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments for up to 95% cheaper. And the best part is the process is 100% online, so it's convenient, and there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. And with hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today into hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with the healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Prices varies based on product and subscription plan. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. We got a mailbag coming your way tomorrow, so this is your last call to get your questions in. Remember, YouTube comments or on social media. Then we got a special bonus episode coming your way Saturday morning. I did a crossover with Brian Smith. You know him as the Locked On Recruiting Insider. He is also the host of Locked On Seminoles. We did a crossover episode to get you ready for the upcoming game. So on Saturday morning, be on the lookout for that special bonus episode. The game is at night, so you have all day to watch it and get ready for the game. The best way to never miss an episode is to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.